Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Edward Elgar. They are a firm of publishers in Cheltenham and they're independent. They provide very high quality research materials for us in the legal world. I'm always delighted to review their works. This particular book I think is of very substantial importance just at the moment. I'm recording this in the late summer of 2017 when the issue of UN sanctions is very high on the political agenda because of matters in North Korea. Now I say that because this is an important book looking at both the United Nations and how those sanctions work, and of course the role of international law itself, because there always have been problems and there will continue to be problems because of rogue regimes, and that's what we're dealing with the North Koreans. However, this book is much wider than that because it's looking at a whole range of important decisions and the huge amount of research material which is available concerning where we are at the moment with international law in this area. Now, I've given my review title another important research handbook from Edward Elgar to cover the issues of the moment regarding UN sanctions at a time of tension internationally. Now, having said all of that, let's have a look at the book first. It's available in its printed form and also as an ebook and online. It's a hardback. There we go. Very much the stable for Edward Elgar. There's the spine, and then on the back there's a quote. The quote is from Christian J. Tams, University of Glasgow, and then there's some details, some of which I've used for the book review itself. And the book inside has a short index, page numbered at the back. Then it's very much the house style of the Edward Elgar publishers. The usual countries are mentioned. Democratic People's Republic of Congo, for instance. Very large number of different countries are mentioned. You can see the structure of the book. There is footnoting at the bottom, and you can see quite a large use of footnoting. And if we go to the front of the book, you can see the structure. It's been edited by Larissa and Herik, and of course what we have here is a collection of contributions. This is the Research Handbooks list for the international law publications that they have published. And there's the front page there. There's the detail if you want to look at it online there. And then you've got the structure, the various parts. Part 1, conceptualization and effectiveness of UN sanctions. Part 2, the functions of UN sanctions. Part 3, design and procedure governing UN sanctions. Part 4, interplay with other regimes. Part 5, regional perspectives, and then the index. 21 chapters. Each chapter has got the name of the contributor, and then the names and the details, the biographical details of the contributors are listed there. I can't go through all of them because there are a large number of people involved, but they have produced what I think is a first-class book. You can see the names of the people involved, some of whom I'm sure you will know. There we go. And then we get into the book itself. The first chapter, written by the editor, the individualization and formalization of UN sanctions. And you can see she starts off with the subheading with a number, and then you've got the footnotes at the bottom. There's no paragraph numbering as such, but there's a little bit of it in some of the contributions. But as I say, it's a detailed book. It's not a book for beginners, but it's an important book. Now, why do I say that? Well, I say that because it's a new title from Elgar, just published just at the right time for international lawyers, with the role of the UN high on the political and legal agenda. Now, as the editor said, Van Herik, the 1990s have been labelled the Sanctions Decade since they witnessed an unprecedented intensification of the use of collective non-military enforcement measures, and in particular sanctions by the post-Cold War reactivated Security Council. And that's the sort of blurb that we've got. Now, having said that, this book is for lawyers primarily, but it's also, I think, for political scientists, because the book is part of the Research Handbook series from Elgar on international law. And there are 25 contributors who review the current practice of UN sanctions in international law, their interrelationship with other regimes, and substantive areas of law, as well as issues arising from their implementation and application at the domestic level. And again, that's the standard information that is being produced about the book. Now, the publishers have commented that in the 25 years following the conclusion of the Cold War, has been witnessed by an unprecedented intensification of the usage of UN sanctions, and that's been shown by what they've actually done. And we haven't really looked at that in any detail, but you can see that the UN has actually got quite considerable clout as a result of that. And of course, the research handbook maps out how our UN sanctions have multiplied and diversified during this period, and it analyses the substantive and procedural transformations to UN sanctions regimes through the lens of international law. And I think that's very helpful because, as I've said before, it's primarily legal, but I think there is a political element to this book as well. Now, the 25 experts describe the different types of UN sanctions regimes, most notably counter-terrorism regimes, counter-proliferation regimes, and conflict resolution regimes, and they trace developments across these regimes, such as increased references to international legal standards in sanctions design and procedure, as well as interplays with other processes and informal arrangements. And the key chapters also specifically examine what are called synergies between UN sanctions and unilateral measures, and explore the different legal frameworks that shape and govern these respective regimes. I think it's important to bear that in mind, because the big question a lot of people have is, are they working? Is this a waste of time? Or are they being busted? The sanctions are being busted. You've got all of these questions which do crop up. They are more the political and practical arguments, but you can see that this is very much the theoretical side of it. Because what the contributors are doing is they're offering a holistic study of UN sanctions. So the handbook identifies cross-cutting issues and common challenges in order to provide an outlook on the future of UN sanctions in a 21st century setting. And as I've said before, remember the history of the UN from 1945 onwards, because it really has changed part of its character. Let me conclude by saying that it's described as comprehensive and engaging. That's what it is. So I think undergraduates and academics in the field of international law and political science and human rights law, as well as things like international relations, presumably at postgraduate level too, more widely, will, I think, find this book an excellent companion for their researches. It's rightly described as forward-thinking in its approach, and the handbook will also, in my view, benefit legal practitioners at the UN, other international organisations, and of course law firms specialising in international law. Now, the publication date is given as at 2017, and it's available, as I say, as an ebook and online. Let's have a quick look at it again. There it is, front, side, spine and the back. I don't really understand the picture on the front, I have to say, but never mind. The design of UN sanctions, I've just opened this in the middle. Again, there's a lot of detail here, huge amount of information. It's not as difficult as you would think to read, but you do have to have some knowledge. There is the footnotes. The footnotes are very detailed. Can I suggest that one of the things you might do, unless you have quite a lot of problems with some of the abbreviations, is ignore the footnotes and just read the basic body copy of the text, because I think you will find that, if anything, makes life a bit easier. Timing matters is another chapter. That's an interesting one. That's come from Kristen E. Boone, Termination Policies for UN Sanctions. Again, you do get to a point where you have to start reviewing where we're going. Anyway, big thank you to all concerned for this book. I think it's an important contribution to contemporary difficulties that we are experiencing globally, and so I'm sure it will be of great help to anybody in a fairly wide readership area. So thank you to all. Bye bye.